Imagine yourself at a desolate bus stop in the dead of night. The wind blows fiercely, scattering dried leaves around you, with only a flickering street light barely holding on to its last glimmer. The darkness clings tightly to the place, leaving you trapped in shadows that seem to grow more real. But there's something scarier than just the darkness. Out of the corner of your eye, you see a small figure, awkward in movement, walking slowly, yet its gaze is filled with malice. What would you do? Would you wait for the bus as you're supposed to, or run from the nightmare that has just begun? That night, Jack planned to head home late after his night shift at a fast food restaurant located in the corner of a small town in an American state. The town wasn't big, but the streets on its outskirts could feel like a different world, isolated from civilization. He chose a rarely used bus stop because it was closer to his workplace. Nothing seemed strange at first, just an eerie silence, occasionally interrupted by the sound of wind rustling the leaves nearby. As Jack sat on the bus stop bench, he sensed something unusual, a heaviness, as if something was pressing down on the air around him. His eyes scanned the area, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. But not far away, behind the bushes now shrouded in the evening's shadows, he saw something. A small figure. At first, Jack thought it was just a wild animal. But the more he stared, the more he realized it wasn't an ordinary animal. It was human, yet its size was far too small, only about 3 feet tall. The clothes it wore appeared tattered, like an old, ragged cloak. But what disturbed Jack the most was its face hidden in the shadows, yet its eyes gleamed with a sinister red glow that couldn't be ignored. Jack tried to brush it off, thinking it might just be his imagination playing tricks on him from exhaustion. However, when he glanced back at the same spot, the figure was closer now, standing at the edge of the sidewalk, just a few meters from the bus stop. Cold sweat began to trickle down Jack's forehead. Who was that creature? Why was it there? The longer Jack stared at the figure, the more details he could make out. Its face was full of sharp wrinkles, its lips curled into an inhuman grin, and its small hands looked more like claws. The figure stood still, unmoving, only staring at Jack with an intensity that made his whole body shiver. Suddenly, Jack heard footsteps. The small figure began to move closer. Jack felt his entire body freeze. There was no sound except for the small, slow footsteps approaching, steady and deliberate. Jack's hands gripped the bus stop bench tightly, trying to maintain his sanity. His brain screamed for him to run, but his legs refused to move. The small dwarf-like creature kept coming closer, and now it was only a few meters away. Those glowing red eyes stared at him without blinking. It felt like the creature could see right into his soul, searching for something hidden. Jack felt the air grow colder, even chillier than a normal night. It was like ice clinging to his skin, gripping him tightly. Who are you?" Jack mumbled with a trembling voice. There was no answer. The figure just kept walking, inching closer until it was only a few steps away from where Jack sat. His breath quickened, and the terror he felt continued to swell. He knew something was wrong. This bus stop seemed to have transformed into an alien place, a space where unspeakable horrors unfolded. The bus he was waiting for still hadn't arrived. Every minute felt like hours, while the small creature crept ever closer. and when the figure finally stood in front of Jack, it stopped. The sound of heavy, labored breathing could be heard clearly, piercing the silence of the night. Jack couldn't hold back any longer. He stood up from the bus stop bench, his body trembling violently. But as soon as he stood, the small figure moved swiftly faster than Jack could imagine. Within seconds, the creature was standing beside him, gazing up at Jack with those fiery red eyes that seemed like embers glowing in the pitch-black darkness. Then, the voice came, not from the creature, but a whisper from all around Jack, as if the wind itself was delivering a message from another world. "Don't wait here. Leave, before it's too late." Jack jolted. He looked around, trying to find the source of the voice, but there was no one. Just him and that small figure. Was he hallucinating? Had his fear driven him mad? But before Jack could think further, the creature laughed a small, shrill, sharp, and cold laugh. The sound of that laugh pierced his ears, making the hair on the back of Jack's neck stand on end. Jack could no longer contain the growing sense of fear. He felt surrounded by something invisible, something beyond logic. He wanted to run, but the dwarf figure blocked his path, staring at him with a wide grin that made Jack feel as though he were being hunted by a bloodthirsty predator. "What do you want from me?" Jack shouted in despair, his voice echoing down the deserted street. The creature didn't respond, only laughed again. The sound of its laughter was like an echo from the depths of darkness, pushing Jack further into a corner. Without warning, the dwarf moved faster than before. In the blink of an eye, its small, claw-like hands gripped Jack's wrist with an unnatural strength for a body so small. Jack felt a coldness that pierced his skin, like being touched by the hand of death. Jack panicked, trying to pull his hand away, but the creature's grip was too strong. His eyes locked onto the dwarf's face, and for the first time, he could see the creature's features clearly. Its skin looked like old tree bark, full of cracks and wrinkles. Its teeth, though small, were sharp like a predator's fangs. Its red eyes gleamed, filled with an inexplicable hatred. "Let me go," Jack screamed, his voice shrill in the silent night. But instead of letting go, the creature pulled him closer. Jack could smell the foul breath of the creature, the stench of death that made his stomach churn. He felt himself losing consciousness from the overwhelming fear when, suddenly, the sound of a bus engine echoed in the distance. The bus was coming, but it was too late. Jack looked up, hoping the bus driver would see him, but the street remained empty. Even though the sound of the bus grew nearer, Jack couldn't see anything. A strange feeling began to cloud his mind. Was the bus real, or was this part of an endless nightmare? Suddenly, the creature's grip loosened, and in an instant, the dwarf disappeared into the shadows of the bus stop, leaving Jack gasping, his hands trembling. Jack immediately ran toward the road, hoping the bus was real. But as soon as he reached the edge of the street, the sound of the bus engine vanished, leaving him alone in the suffocating silence. He stood still for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. What happened to the bus? And where had the dwarf gone? Jack's mind raced, but one thing was certain: he couldn't stay here any longer. He began to walk away from the bus stop quickly, glancing over his shoulder every few steps to ensure the creature wasn't following him. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, growing darker with each step. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, like eyes were tracking his every movement from the shadows. As he walked, his thoughts drifted back to the strange stories he'd heard at work. There were rumors from the locals about a dwarf figure haunting certain parts of town, especially the old, rarely used bus stops. Those who saw the figure often disappeared without a trace, and those who returned were never the same, like a part of their soul had been taken. But Jack had never believed those stories. Until tonight. Jack's steps halted when he heard the sound of small footsteps behind him. His heart raced, and he quickly turned around. There was no one there, only the empty road and the distant trees swaying gently in the wind. But Jack knew the creature was still there, following him, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. In a state of panic, Jack ran toward town, hoping to find someone who could help him. But the farther he ran, the stronger the feeling of being chased became. The dwarf figure appeared again at the edge of his vision, like a shadow moving between trees and empty buildings. Suddenly, out of the darkness, an old man appeared, standing in the middle of the road. Jack nearly ran into him, but the man extended his hand, stopping Jack from falling. Jack's breath was ragged, his eyes wide with fear. "You need to get out of here," the old man said in a raspy voice. "He won't stop until he gets what he wants." Jack stared at the old man, confused and terrified. What do you mean? Who is he?" The old man looked at Jack with tired eyes, as if he had been carrying this secret for far too long. "That creature, it's not just any human. It's an evil spirit, trapped here for decades. It's searching for something it lost, something it can only get from humans who wander into its territory." Jack shuddered at the explanation. "What does it want?" "Your soul," the old man answered, his voice sharp and brief. "And it won't stop until it gets it." Jack remained silent, trying to digest the old man's words. His soul, an evil spirit. It all sounded like nonsense, but after what he had just experienced, Jack could no longer deny the strange reality that was trapping him. The old man seemed to know more than anyone else, and Jack's only hope was to listen and follow his instructions. "What do you mean by something missing?" Jack asked, his voice trembling. The old man let out a long sigh, his wrinkled face looking even more creased under the dim street light. "That creature, it got trapped in this world after its death. There's something missing from it, a part of its life it couldn't carry into death. And it's looking for someone who has something similar to that missing piece." Jack furrowed his brow, confused. "What does that have to do with me?" The old man stared deeply at Jack. "There's something inside you, something from your past that it desires. You may not realize it, but the creature can sense it. It won't let you go until it gets what it's after." Jack stood frozen. What could possibly be inside him that a malevolent spirit would want? His mind spun, trying to recall anything from his past that might be linked to this terror. He thought about his family, his friends, and any strange events in his life, but nothing seemed to fit or explain what was happening. However, the more he thought, the more he began to feel something hidden within him, a faint memory long buried deep inside. Like a shadow waiting to be revived, but Jack was too afraid to remember. "How can I defeat it?" Jack asked, his voice shaky. The old man looked at him grimly. You can't defeat it with physical strength. Only by confronting what you've forgotten, the memory it seeks, can you break free from this curse. Jack followed the old man to a small, secluded house at the edge of town. The house looked worn and forgotten, as if no one had lived there for years. Inside, Jack felt a coldness that pierced through him, as though traces of a dark history still haunted the place. The old man lit a candle, casting a dim light that pushed back some of the darkness. He motioned for Jack to sit in an old chair in the living room. Before them, there was a wooden table cluttered with strange items, talismans, a small mirror, and ancient books that seemed like relics of the past. You must face your past, Jack, the old man said firmly. That memory has long been buried within you, but if you want to survive, you need to unearth it. Jack swallowed hard, fear gripping him once again. What had he forgotten? What memory was the creature after? The old man pulled out an old book and opened it, revealing pages filled with drawings of small, eerie figures. This is an ancient spirit. They often take this form, small, unassuming, but very dangerous. They are trapped between our world and the world of the dead, seeking something that can free them. Jack felt nauseated as he looked at the drawings. How do I face this creature? He asked. You must recover that memory, the old man replied, taking out a small mirror from the table. Look into this mirror. Let the forgotten memory rise to the surface. Jack hesitated, but eventually took the mirror. As he stared at his own reflection, the world around him seemed to fade. Darkness crept in, and suddenly, he was thrown back to his childhood. Jack now stood inside an old house, where he had spent much of his childhood. He saw himself as a 7-year-old boy, running through the yard. His heart ached as he watched this carefree child, oblivious to the darkness that awaited him in the future. But as he looked closer, Jack noticed something strange. There was another child, smaller than him, sitting in the corner of the yard. The child seemed odd, too quiet, and was staring at young Jack with eyes filled with envy. Jack felt something was wrong. The small child suddenly stood up and began approaching young Jack. Its face, once ordinary, transformed into something horrifying. Its skin wrinkled, its eyes turned red, and its teeth sharpened like those of a beast. The adult Jack, watching all this, felt his heart stop. That child, that creature, had been following him since he was young. This memory had long been buried due to the trauma it caused. Suddenly, the creature disappeared, and adult Jack was pulled back into reality. He collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The old man stood over him, nodding slowly. Now you know the truth. That night, Jack and the old man returned to the bus stop where it all began. Jack knew that if he wanted to free himself from the small creature, he had to confront it in the very place where the terror had started. The sky above them was dark, without stars, and the cold wind cut through their bones. Jack could feel the creature's presence growing closer, approaching them with small, almost imperceptible steps. The old man handed Jack a talisman from his pocket. This will help you, but remember, only by facing your fear and accepting the memory can you survive. The small creature emerged from the shadows of the bus stop, more terrifying than ever. Its red eyes glowed, and a wicked grin spread across its face as it slowly crept toward Jack. Jack gripped the talisman tightly, but he knew its true power didn't lie in the object. He had to accept that this creature had been following him for his entire life, and now he was ready to face it. Trembling, Jack stepped forward, staring directly at the creature. "You may have followed me my whole life, but tonight, I'm ending this," he said, his voice steady despite the fear inside him. The creature paused, studying Jack with its glowing eyes, as if evaluating the truth in his words. Then, without warning, it lunged at Jack, baring its sharp fangs, ready to devour his soul. But Jack no longer felt fear. He had accepted his past, the dark memory he had once forgotten. He knew the only way this terror would end was by confronting it head-on. In an instant, the small creature vanished, disintegrating into dust in the cold night air. Jack collapsed to the ground, exhausted but relieved. Finally, the nightmare was over. The old man approached him, helping Jack to his feet. "You did it, kid. You faced it." Jack looked at the bus stop, now brighter, as if the darkness that had haunted him was gone. "Am I really free?" The old man gave him a faint smile. "For now, yes. But remember, darkness always lurks in the most unexpected places. Stay vigilant." Have you ever felt like something was following you, without you realizing it? Maybe it's not just your imagination. Perhaps, like Jack, there's something from your past you've yet to confront. Darkness often hides in the most unexpected places, like an empty bus stop at night. Be careful, and never look back if you feel something following you. It might just be a small creature, waiting for you to let your guard down. Like, share, and subscribe for more horror stories. Don't forget to leave a comment below about your own frightening experiences.